Breslin started working on newspapers many years ago when he wrote, edited, and printed The Flash, a neighborhood newspaper in Ozone Park, Queens. He's worked at almost every major newspaper in the city, from the Long Island Press to the Herald Tribune, the New York Daily News, New York Newsday, and now Newsday. He's covered sports, murders, larcenies, excuse me, politics, just about anything you could imagine and more. And as a columnist, he gives us his never-sparing opinions and pronouncements 3 times a week. He's turned many phrases like smoke and mirrors and the gang that couldn't shoot straight, and written 13 books, starting with Can Anyone Here Play This Game?, a book about the first season of the New York Mets. His most recent books have been a memoir, I Want to Thank My Brain for Remembering Me, and a novel about today's mafia, I Don't Want to Go to Jail, a good novel. He thinks there's nothing as lonely as the sun on a blade of grass and nothing as beautiful as a crowded street in Brooklyn. He thinks boring is a felony crime. He loves New York and thrives on its energy and excitement. And finally, he's been my husband for almost 20 years. Together we have 9 children and 10 grandchildren. So welcome to my program, Eldridge and Company. Yes. Can you believe that you've been married to me for almost 20 years?
Yes, easy. It's been delightful. Why, you haven't liked it?
No, it's been a challenge, but it's been great. It's never boring, as we've already said. You don't like that, right?
No.
I've noticed lately that you don't go to the newsroom as much as you used to. Is that because I'm no longer in the city council and I'm home, or has the newspaper business really changed?
Well, the newspaper business has changed and been damaged badly by one thing, and that's the absence of saloons. Now, there they laugh. They always think
it's 20 years and you really don't go to saloons since I've known you.
They think they come out of it.
Okay.
The center of newspaper life and of television reporting, if it's done right, always was the bar after work, where nobody drank before they worked. That's a myth. But after work, you gather with a lot of people from your place, from other places, and you talk about, excuse me, the stories of the day, who said what, one good phrase you read or you heard on the television, somebody turned a line, and a ton of whiskey and beer, and we went into places. Well, I was at Blake's by the Herald Tribune. That's gone. We moved to the Daily News. There was the Gaddy behind the building, and Costello's, which might have been the best for us because it had a lot of British journalists there, and you could listen to them.
I remember Costello's. It was so dark, and once they had to turn the lights on, and everybody fainted from the dirt and the mess that was around, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
What has that got to do with the fact that somebody remembers hearing a very good phrase? It was exciting, it was good for the business. That's gone. People now, they take one glass of wine of anything, they go to a health club after work, which is great for the body and terrible for the stories, and then they go home to the family. They're better off in the bar, number one. And two, the inside of a newspaper now, the whole thing of the paper used to be at 5:30 at night on a deadline. The smoke, it looked, you could hardly see the other side of the room. The noise of the typewriters, which is, it seems like it was just yesterday, they were gone. And the noise came up and the smoke, and out of that excitement of poor health, if you will, plus the carriages of the typewriters, produced a nervous energy, without which a newspaper, you might as well not buy it, if there's no energy. People can tell when they're reading a story in a newspaper if you've done a day's work and if you put some energy into the writing of it. They can tell. Maybe they can't tell you exactly why, but they can feel it, they sense it, there's a chemistry to it. There is no more. They sit down at the computer. Number one, you can't smoke. It's brilliant for the health, but terrible for the readers. There's no excitement. Two, the machines don't make any noise, the computer.
And they wear baseball caps instead of fedoras,
Oh,
right?
I love that. Yeah, that really thrills me. A baseball cap with a Nike sign on it or something.
But so much of life has changed. I mean, we're more there's more health awareness, so you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't, you eat carefully. So
but
you're not eating all that
out
stuff.
of which comes the one worst word in the English language, and particularly in writing, boring.
Right. But
You should go to jail if you write a boring story.
But it's not that simple. Don't you think the television had something to do with the change in the reporting of news?
Saloons
Not necessarily for the better, but don't you think that happened?
No, they stopped hanging out in saloons. That comes ahead of anything.
Did television reporters ever hang out in saloons?
Yeah, they did. Yes, they did. It's no accident that Gabe Pressman is around at age, he says he's 74, I think.
But he didn't hang out in bars, did he?
Yes, he did. Don't say he didn't drink. It is also no accident that at her age, Joan Didion, who takes a drink, is winning all awards for her books and her writing, which is the most perceptive political writing in the United States, and she takes a drink. And so does her husband, John Gregory Dunn, and he's prolific and to the point and makes a tremendous contribution.
But
the non-drinkers give you nothing. And
all right. I mean, but it's an imagination and a joy in living as much as drinking, isn't it? But that's how you got it from drinking.
The drink helps the imagination and the conversation. That sounds like
I come from a family where nobody ever got drunk. So when I married you, it was the first time that I ever sat with somebody who drank a lot.
Yeah.
And
well, I don't anymore.
And
but
then you stopped, right? Not because of me, but because it took its toll, right?
It's lucky. No, it took its toll that I couldn't.
So are you saying now that you're not drinking, you're boring?
Oh, you mean after work? Desperate.
Or in your life?
It's the worst.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Right. Well,
it's the healthiest, but the worst.
All right.
But thank the Lord I have that heritage in me of coming out of newspaper saloons, and I still can operate that way when I'm
Is that
working.
why you never drove a car?
Oh, no, I never drove a car for a very good reason.
Why?
I started in the Long Island Press when I was 16. I told you all this. I'll tell you all again. When I was 16, I lived on the corner of 134th Street and Jerome Avenue, we called it. It was 101st Avenue, really. And you had the Q8 bus in front of the house. You had the A train down at Lefferts Boulevard. You had the E and the F up 3 blocks. There was 8th Avenue subway, we called it. And then you had the M train and the J going to Broad Street and L on Jamaica Avenue. Why? You didn't need a car. There was no sense having one. Where were you going to take it? And I neglected to say we had a save of the Long Island Railroad out of Jamaica Station, which was only a couple of blocks. You'd get on the train in the last car and then walk to the first car. And by the time you got there, you're at Penn Station and they didn't have time to grab you for a ticket.
Now you can't walk between cars.
Now you can't. But I had all that, and then I went to the Long Island Press, and I was working as a copy boy then in the sports department, and they paid you no money. It was Newhouse's first big successful paper. You had 250,000 circulation, and they paid nobody. You needed a shotgun to get paid. So the meager money I had in my hand at the end of a week, I wasn't going to blow it on some smelly old second or third hand car. I wanted to put it on the bar.
What time
20
did you
or
finish?
4 in the morning.
So maybe that was
You
part
run
of
to
it
the
also.
bar.
Yeah.
Run to the bar.
What time did the bars close?
But you bought it as much as you could. You looked at whatever you had, and you just ordered beers to match the money, and then you could sit there for the next
so
day
you could
after
stay there.
closing.
It doesn't close. It just stops serving.
You'd stay there, and maybe the guy would give you a tour on the house or something, so you could be there for a good time.
We have a painting at home. It's a great abstract painting, large, and it's got all these different symbols and stuff behind it. But then it's got these 2 polar bears that are very realistic. It's called Poles Apart.
Yeah.
Is that what people think you and I are?
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, it's so funny because here we come from different religions, different neighborhoods in the city, but we're so compatible. So it's all part of unexpected things in life. I mean, is this too introspective a question for you?
Yeah, excitement. That's the only thing you should look for.
All right.
Anybody that gets married for any other reason than excitement is crazy. There's one thing, though. You're dead without the money. Money can knock you out of business.
What do
That's
you,
all I would say.
I mean, you're known sometimes, or some people, especially when we're out of town, as Mr. New York or something.
No.
Everybody thinks you know all about New York. We know that you don't know everything. But you're pretty...
I do, but I don't say it.
Well, you do say it. I mean, that's why my kids all have to say JB #1. But anyway, what do you think are the major problems in this city?
There's only been one since the day I started, was race. There's never been any other
And
problem.
has that changed? I mean,
No.
Now, when did you start? How long ago?
I started...
When was The Flash?
No, I started...
How
well,
old
the
were you
Flash-
when you wrote The Flash?
Oh, that was 8 years old or something.
And
But
you-
I started at the Long Island Press at 16, right?
Right.
And there was... Well, I don't remember any other thing. There was South Jamaica, it was black, and then Red Fern Rookery they wrote about in Far Rockaway was all black, and wherever
So
it was,
let's date it.
wherever
When was it?
visible,
When was that? In the 50s?
boy, I'll tell you how long ago it was. 1940s. 1951, I covered a baseball game, the Giants against the Dodgers at the old Polo Grounds. It was the run for a pennant by the Giants, the year they won with the miracle home run or whatever you call it. And Larry Jansen was the pitcher for the Giants, and I wrote the game. You wrote it on a typewriter in the press box, and I gave it to a guy named Sal who was sitting next to me. He took the copy, and on a Morse code, he sent it into the Long Island Press Sports Department. Because you're on a Saturday afternoon and you're on early deadlines for a Sunday paper.
How did they send the picture?
I'll get to that. Let me talk about it. And then in the sports department, Frank Dewey, his name is, I can remember the names of these guys. He took it down. He would listen to it and type as it came in. It sounds like a million years ago. It probably was, but it's fresh in my lifetime. The pictures came by carrier pigeons from the baseball field. They strapped the film after they took it onto the pigeon's homing pigeon and threw them up in the air. They circled around home plate while the umpire and everybody ducked. And then they went up in the sky and they flew to the roofs of the Journal-American, the Herald Tribune, all these newspapers and the Long Island Press. That's where they.
So is that a proof of what? I don't know how old we are. I guess
it's just proof of the way the technology has changed, and you have trouble when I look at a fax machine. I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm amazed by it. The other
cell phone.
Cell phone is
and Mickey Brennan sending his pictures through the telephone to England.
Mickey Brennan is a fellow I know from Costello's Bar. He was with the London Mail, and he's at the phone booth on the corner of 68th Street and Broadway, outside the supermarket. And I saw him there one afternoon. I said, "What are you doing?" He's got a attaché case open. He screwed the phone off. He's got some wire stuck in there. He says, "It's going right now onto the printing press of the first page of the London Mail from here where we're standing." And he's a little saloon guy, and he could handle that technology. I didn't have the slightest. I was amazed.
Yeah.
But they do that all the time.
And now people just take pictures and they get put onto the computer, and that's it. Nobody. I mean, you worry about, or Kodak worries about what's going to happen to its company, right?
Well, they should.
Right.
I saw this, but what do you call it, DVD camera? I saw that working.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Yeah. It can block out everything around the subject, and you can make a movie out of it. You don't even have to have a crowd control.
We were just talking before. I remember taking the trolley car to school.
Yeah.
I tell that to my kids, and they look at me and like I lived in a cave. Or I remember my first job, which was at CBS, and I had to type 6 carbons in an original. Or we used to, Friday afternoon, go up to the roof of 485 Madison Avenue and watch as the engineers kept turning the dials so we could watch the Mike Wallace Buff Cobb show. That was the only show broadcast in color. So it's been a long time, and we've been very fortunate. We're going to interrupt this conversation for a minute because they want to break, and we'll be back in a minute. Thank you.
One of the reasons lions roar is to warn threatening bachelor males from other prides to stay away from their young. Here, a lion cub gets a lesson in proper roaring from its father. Teaching this behavior is not just crucial to the pride, but also to the survival of the species. Just a reminder how important it is for fathers to spend time with their children.
I'm back with Jimmy Breslin. You have an important thought?
Well, when I started in the newspapers at age 16, I was at the Long Island Press in Jamaica, 168th Street and Jamaica Avenue. People typed their stories with carbons.
Yeah.
You ever see carbon paper lately?
I did.
When's the last piece you saw?
It's invisible now. I mean, you even go to the bank, you don't get carbon paper, but it comes out.
Well, we had carbon paper. You took the carbons of the story that were written, folded them, they put them in a manila envelope, and you took them you went up to Hillside Avenue, got on the E train, and went to Queens Plaza, where they had another newspaper, the New Houses, the Long Island Star Journal. It was at Queens Plaza, and it covered the North Shore of Queens. That was the way they were doing it. It's still there, the building with the faded sign on the brick wall. And you bring these carbons upstairs to this terrible city room and throw them down, and that was your modern communications.
You mean you brought the carbon copies,
Carbon
not the
copies.
carbon
Well, you call them carbons.
Yeah,
Drop them off.
And that was how you did it.
Yep, and then anything else you did, for example, in those days, all the papers sent by Western Union, the stories in, if they didn't. Well, they had a rule that the newspapers got like half price on a long telegram. But if you put on the bottom regards, if you're being nice, they upped that up to a personal message and cost a fortune. So all newspapers were always fighting with the writers. Right. Don't send it. Can you call? Can you do anything? Don't put regards, and maybe don't send the thing at all. Mail it. They look to save money.
Let's go back to the question of race, because you said it really hasn't changed, but it has changed, hasn't it? I mean, people are more conscious of the difference of race. People of color are more. They object more to being not considered or not treated as equally as people who are white. What do you think is happening?
How many black firemen were there in the World Trade Center?
There weren't any, were
All
there?
right.
Were there any?
No, a couple.
So
what else do you want to find?
Well, I mean, there must be some difference. Don't be obtuse. Tell me.
Well, let's go to the courts. Let's go to any court in
Well, one difference is you were at the game when Jackie Robinson first played baseball, right? That was a big difference.
Yes,
because now it's right.
Let's go to the court. Jackie Robinson was the biggest social advance in the history of this country.
Right.
Bond nobody.
All right.
He was brought in before the armed forces were integrated.
Right.
When Martin Luther King was a sophomore in high school, it was a big move. Now, you go into the courts today, Bronx, go any place, in any court, and tell me how many whites you see.
Practically
go to
nobody.
Rikers Island, who do you find?
You may find them in the Supreme Court, but nobody practically in family court or criminal court, right?
Well, go to Rikers Island.
Right.
You
go
see
to any prison. 85% of the people, 85% of the people are people of color. There's no doubt about that.
Two whites that think they're tough, and the rest of it's black. So what's that, a change?
So what happens? Is it the political leadership? What is it?
What's the fear of color? Color fear, that rules everything. What are you talking about? Johnny McGuire always had a thing about basketball. He had the brothers coached and played. He always had a thing about basketball that they'd lose a tenth of a thousandth of a step because they're up against a black guy playing. There's a lot of whites in the NBA. Come on, they've got certain things.
Golf,
they've got
hockey. There are certain sports that
you cannot handle people of color. You can't keep them out of basketball because they own the game.
Right.
But how many whites are in the housing projects in the city?
Not too many.
So what? Come on, it's the biggest, it's the largest problem. You got 1 million students in the New York City public schools, of which 90% are of color, something. And what's that mean? And they're not learning anything. Why is that? Because the teachers don't want to teach them?
No.
No, they'd like to teach them, but they're so afraid the color fear comes in.
I don't agree with you that it's the teachers. I believe.
Well, who's in the classroom?
I believe, and you know that watching our 10 grandchildren and all the advantages that they had early on, and knowing now that the brain develops even before birth, the children are put into school at a great disadvantage. Children of color, they don't have the music lessons, they don't have the swimming, they don't have the talking, the constant talking, educating. They don't listen to the music. They don't have any of the advantages the children who come from more middle income or higher income families have. They get put into school and they are not prepared.
Well, wait a minute. They get put into school. They're all together.
I think
you can't say that the whites are racing past them in the schools because there are no whites in the schools.
Well, they don't go to those schools because
they
feel that they're not. Go on.
They don't want to go to school with
But in
blacks.
the schools that are integrated, which there are a few, that the black children, the children of color, are doing just as well, I think, as the children.
Because there are whites there to monitor the teachers' performance. White parents. Now let's go on.
I don't think you can put it all to teachers, though.
Well, who else is in the classroom?
It's not just in the classroom. It's where children live. It's what they do early on. They don't go to a classroom till they're 5 years old. Now, you can't say the first 5 years of a child's life is not influential into what's going to happen to them afterwards.
I don't want to hear what they could do if they're raised on the West Side or in Riverdale or where all the good people live, or Forest Hills.
Whatever. Queens has come on.
Very good.
All right.
2 places.
Right.
3. I'll give you 3 neighborhoods.
No, don't give me neighborhoods. I don't want neighborhoods.
We're good. Yeah.
We only have a half hour, so let's go and talk about some other things.
No, this is good because the teachers are the only ones in the classrooms and they don't get anything done. Who are you supposed to blame now?
That is just not true that teachers don't get anything done. I don't agree with you about that.
We're in a city university studio, so I have to conform and say they're great? Is that what you're trying to do to me? I won't.
There are some teachers that are not great teachers, but there are teachers who are wonderful teachers. The school system, the classes are too large. They don't have enough money in the classrooms.
54 students in my school.
We don't have, how many?
54, St. Benedict Joseph Library, 118
And look
Street,
at you, you
Richmond
still
Hill.
won't wear gloves or mittens, and you don't play games, and you only will write. I mean, I don't think you got such a great education.
Yes, it was pretty good. I learned to put a comma
and
before
how long
but.
did it take you to get through high school?
That was a full 5 years.
Right, so was that the teacher's fault or yours? That was the teacher's fault. I shouldn't
Yes,
have asked you that question.
The teachers were the worst, and the textbooks, you couldn't read them. The print was so small, and they were written so poorly that I didn't want to bother with them. And they never forgot. They're vengeful people. I wrote a book review for the New York Times, which is as good a review as anybody's seen on McSorley's Ale House. I gave the date it was started in this country. The Times made a big thing out of the review. And don't they get a letter saying I had the date wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong, and the letter was from a retired John Adams High School teacher.
Well,
and he was wrong. He was just vicious to the end.
Jimmy, we don't have so much time, so let's go on. You want to talk a little bit about politics? I first met you years ago when Robert Kennedy was the senator. It was during the Vietnam War. The kids were down at City Hall when John Lindsay was the mayor. There was a spirit and excitement, at least in the part of people.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me there was, with John Kennedy and other people, there was a raising of a level. Even if we know what happens underneath, there was a rhetoric, there was inspiration. Do you think we have that now?
No. And at that time, I mean, for my own personal life, I had an Irish Catholic president. How was I going to not be excited? But now let's look at where the excitement in others came from the draft.
But we had Ronald Reagan, wasn't he?
Yeah, but he didn't have a draft. A military draft certainly caused tremendous upheaval. And it was people didn't want to go. The minute the draft ended, the war resistance effort ended.
It got
Bang.
smaller.
Not smaller.
No,
dead.
there have always been people.
A few people.
Right.
But the thing died the minute
Right.
college students were no longer vulnerable. And the minute, guys, you'd be in a bar at that time and you could tell who had daughters. They'd before the war. And anybody with a couple of sons was very shaky on going to Vietnam, on a Vietnam war. You'll find that now. If they're going to start, what is this, Axis?
Yeah, the Axis
Rome,
of evil.
Berlin,
Right.
Tokyo. They're living in the father's past.
But
Now, how many men do you think you'll need to fight those wars? Iran, Iraq, North Korea, and where's the other one? The three of them.
that's it. Iran, Iraq, and North Korea.
Yeah. How many do you think we'll
The
need?
axis of power. We'll need a lot of them, and I
There'll
hope
be
we
an
won't have them.
anti-war.
Let me just.
There'll be a big anti-war movement.
But do you think that politics in the older days? I mean, I worked in the McGovern time when we were going to change the rules of the convention. It's when candidates got elected from a convention with the bosses, the big political bosses. And then we opened it up. So we got all these primaries. We've increased the cost of campaigning. We've got television and we've got polling and we have political manipulators. What do they call themselves? The political
Anybody
the
listens to
operatives?
them is a sucker.
But aren't they the ones who are running everything nowadays? I mean, they see the papers quote a political person who's hired to run a campaign as the campaigner. And with the use of polls, we're bringing down everybody's opinions. I mean, we are diluting leadership, aren't we?
Well, I don't know about diluting leadership. I don't know what kind of leadership
I mean,
you
nobody
have.
seems to be willing to take a risk, or a few people seem to be willing to take a risk and take a position that they don't think the majority of the people that they find in a poll that they've commissioned disagree with.
You're probably right. I only know one thing about it. I'm absolutely sure. All these media consultants, as they're called, and they're supposed to be so brilliant, not a one of them can go out and do any advertising in the public, in the private area for products and things. Ralph Schoon, who was called the genius with Jimmy Carter, went out and tried to do products. He came home on a shield, the worst things you ever saw. Terrible. David Garth can't make a commercial. Nothing. One, in all the people you've had and heard about, the media gurus, the newspapers, these jerks, call them, of all of them, there was only one guy, Howard Zeif, Z-E-I-F, did a couple of commercials for John Lindsay in 1969. He went to Hollywood and he directed a couple of big Barbra Streisand movies. So he could do things. I don't know anybody else is employable, except once a year they latch on to some politician, some jerk like Mark Green, and they tell him, you're brilliant, you're handsome, I'm going to make you mayor and then king. Listen to me,
I don't
pay
think
money.
they had to tell Mark that. I think
No.
he wanted to be mayor.
Nobody told him what he was.
Jimmy, you remember Debs Meyer? He was the one.
He was different. He's smart.
He's the one who said hidden persuaders should remain hidden.
That's right.
I'll never forget that expression,
right.
and that we could use that nowadays.
It all comes from the newspapers, the difference between newspapers and television. Now, most of the people working on newspapers, nearly all of them, aren't good looking enough to get on television. It does. They're ugly looking people work on papers. Gnomes with pads and pens.
No,
you
they're
can't.
not.
Yep, don't tell
You
me.
work on a newspaper. I think you're beautiful.
That's good. And the television people are mostly about what they look like. So they don't, they must be gurus, they must be geniuses. Anybody can do television according to the newspaper people. Who would say that, what's his name? Who's this? Hank Morris is a political, how can he even put his name in a political story? Who's the other one there? The Scheinkopf. All these names get in the stories only in a political year. The rest of the year you never hear from them because they can't do anything.
Well, I hope that someday you'll come back and we'll talk more about politics. But this has really been a very sample of what happens in our house early in the morning, right? Except that you weren't quite as dictatorial as you are in the morning. Do you think you're like a city editor with your family?
No.
Is that an assignment editor? What do you call those people?
I know what I want.
Yeah, and you know what you want for everybody else.
No.
Well,
if you're going to make fun of me, I'm going to go.
I'm not going to make fun of you. I've enjoyed
I'm not
this discussion.
a comic object.
All right, we'll leave it at that. But thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for watching.